I would like to call the June 4th, 2024 meeting of the Cloverdale Planning Commission to order at 6 o'clock. If you can all rise and please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Should we? Sorry. It's a little distracted.
Hid your face. Start going.
It's good. Yeah. City Clerk, can we please have a roll call?
Thank you, Chair. Let the record reflect that all commissioners are present with the exception of Chair Sanders, who resigned earlier today, meaning that all commissioners are present.
Thank you. Do any commissioners have any conflicts of interest for any items listed on tonight's agenda? Okay. Staff, are there any changes or declarations to the agenda this evening?
No changes. Is it working? Hello? Yeah. Okay.
Moving on to public comments. Any person wishing to speak to the Planning Commission on any item not listed on the agenda may do so at this time. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the Planning Commission is not allowed to consider issues or take action on any items not listed on the agenda. Comments from the public will be allowed on all agenda items at the time each item is called. In-person commenters may fill out a speaker card before or after they have spoken. Please submit to the city clerk for the record. 3 minutes are allotted to each speaker. With that, I will now officially open the public comment period at 6:02. Mr. Clerk, are any members wishing to speak at this time?
Thank you, Chair. No members of the public are wishing to speak at this time.
Okay, seeing no hands raised, I'd like to close public comment at 6:02. Communications. The Commission may discuss at this time the written communications sent to staff or the commissioners since the last Planning Commission meeting.
Received one communication regarding the item. Is this working? From Ms. Barbara LeBlanc. Thanks, Mike. Is that better? Yeah. We did receive one communication from Ms. Barbara LeBlanc regarding this item, and she's here tonight, so she'll probably give us an update on that when we talk about the item.
Moving on to the consent calendar, all items under the consent calendar will be considered together by one action of the Planning Commission unless any commissioners or members of the public request that an item be removed and considered separately. Would any members of the Planning Commission or public like to move an item from the consent calendar? Can I get a motion for the consent calendar?
I move to approve the calendar.
Is there a second?
I'll second that, yeah.
I moved. Oh, did I do the roll call? Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
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 Thank you. The motion passes with a vote of 5-0.
Thank you. Sorry about that with the tech issues. Yes, the item consent calendar passed.
Okay, moving on to public hearings. Item F1, Municipal Code Amendment Z08013, 2024, amending Section 1811060, recreational vehicle parking of the Cloverdale Municipal Code.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Before we get into this, I asked Chief Parker from our police department to come and give us just a quick overview of RV parking on public streets. There was a lot of discussion of that at the last Planning Commission meeting. I think there was, what we're dealing with here really has to do with parking on private property, but there was a lot of questions, so I asked Chief that maybe he could just give us a quick overview of what can be parked where and how long, and just the basics about that whole component.
Good evening, Commissioner. How do I properly address you folks?
Finish.
Commission? Okay. So if an officer goes to an address for a call of an RV parked for an extended period of time, obviously they would look at the 72-hour ordinance that we have. And that time limit begins when the officer sees it and marks it. The officer can't mark the vehicle physically. They have to mark the street. Somebody complained, and it's a violation of their civil rights or whatever for us to actually mark a tire, because we used to actually chalk tires. Can't do it anymore. We have to chalk the ground. In the rain, we'll use a penny. We'll put a penny on the tire and see if it moves. The ordinance doesn't specifically say how far the vehicle has to move. It can move a foot, and that 72-hour clock restarts. So once we get if the vehicle doesn't move, we can either cite it or tow it. In the case of RVs, and you may not know that no one will tow them because of the hazardous waste associated with it. So if in a worst case scenario, we had an accident downtown with an RV, we had to tow it because it was blocking the roadway. We had to pay for it out of the general fund for that bill. And they charge you by the foot, by the distance. There's only one company that will tow it who is out of Santa Rosa, and they will bill you thousands of dollars. So it's an ongoing problem within the county and probably the state. And they just don't want to tow them. It's just because of the disposal problem of RVs. But we do cite them and deal with them that way. We do try and gain compliance by contacting the RV owner. And usually we can get compliance for them to move it at least. But it's an ongoing issue that we face. And we usually operate off of complaints. Someone complaining about a specific RV parked somewhere on the street. Private property, the officer will not deal with that. It will be referred up to that man there. Because there's no, as you know, code enforcement is going away. The council elected not to pursue or proceed with our current code enforcement officer, so that everything will fall back onto Raphael. And actually, I just had a conversation with Raphael about an RV today, parked across the lawn on someone's property or near a city park. But it's happening all over town, and so the officers will deal with it on a complaint basis. It's parked on the roadway. We will, like I said, we'll deal with it with a 72-hour violation. So, questions? Yes.
Could I ask about commercial vehicles that there happens to be one sitting on 4th Street near Jefferson. There's actually 3. They've been sitting there. I think they're kind of commercial. They've been sitting there for months, and it don't really bother me that much, but they just sit there,
They're not moved at all. They're just
Not that I've noticed. No.
Okay, so if it's on a city street, it's anything. It could be parked there if it's under 6,000 pounds. We would have to go out there and actually look at the car. We got a complaint of on Elbridge about business vehicles being parked there, a tree trimming place or something like that. Went out there. It was actually the truck that was there at the time was an F-150, and they're under the 6,000 pound limit. Can be parked on the roadway in Cloverdale. We do have an ordinance for large, anything over 5 tons, which is a commercial vehicle, and that's pretty much on the Cloverdale Boulevard, Citrus Fair out to Asti, and it's defined in the ordinance of certain areas. It's the major streets where they can, you'll see a big rig parked right at the Times Square area, right on, right just before Hillsburg Avenue and Citrus Fair. They can legally park there because it's zoned that way, so.
Thank you.
In the citing process, are we assessing, is this a fee being assessed, or is it, okay? what
Yeah,
is
it's
that?
a fee. I don't know off the top of my head what the fee is. I'm not sure.
Does it usually, is the fee enough that it usually causes action?
I wouldn't say so. What we like to do is if we have to tow a car or, God forsaken, an RV, I always encourage them to do both. Because if you get so many parking citations and you don't pay them, it starts affecting your registration. You can't renew your registration without paying off your parking tickets. So if they park it on the street and the registration is over 6 months, it doesn't matter what kind of vehicle it is, officer can tow it just for expired registration after 6 months. So it adds up. I wouldn't say a fee deters them from doing it. And you got to look at it, well, if an officer comes by once a month and it costs me $50 a ticket, what does that cost to store the vehicle? You know, it's going to cost more than $50 a month to store an RV in a place that actually stores RVs.
Right.
So,
And is it the same process for boats and trailers?
yes.
Okay. Are you guys able to, or have you towed any boats or trailers, just that there's?
We have, not to my knowledge, we haven't towed any. No. I know we've had issues with a trailer that had I think it was a lawnmower on it, parked over, but in the Ferber area. Finally got them to comply, but they were just kind of moving it around a little bit here and there, and so we finally were able to get it off the street, but so.
Any other questions?
I'd like some clarification on the enforcement. When you say you reach out to them, is that by knocking on the door of the house it's by, or letters in the mail?
Yeah, so we'll run the plate, and we usually know most of these folks.
Yeah.
So we could track them down, right? We have their cell phone number. We'll go up to the house. After we run the plate, it'll come back to a certain address. So we'll try and track them down that way, just to try and gain compliance, whether, if it's, there's a transient person that moves the RV around town. We know who that person is. We can find her. Or I'd say unsheltered, I guess is the term. But if it's associated with an actual residence, we will track that person down and contact them to gain compliance, because usually we put the red notice on their thing. May or may not see it, but the ultimate goal is to get compliance. So, so we try and do our best to locate the individual and to get them to move the car or RV in this case to a proper location. But and again, the ordinance doesn't say how far you have to move it. In Cotati, it's a mile. Of course, you have to look at the digital, the odometer, and we used to make notes on citations. The odometer is X. Did they move it a mile? Now everything's digital, but so it's kind of difficult. But so it's a tough thing to kind of police, because did they move it? Did they not move it? Some people, well, I moved it, but I just parked in the same spot. How do you? So sometimes we'll put a penny. Okay, the penny's still there. You didn't move it. And so.
Any other questions for Chief Parker? Well, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Chief. I know it's tough to, when the ordinance really only you have to move it a couple feet, and it just makes it difficult and frustrating, I know, for everybody, but that's where we are with the ordinance. So this item is the RV parking, as Vice Chair said earlier. And what we did was we listened to what your comments were, and we tried to encapsulate those in an ordinance amendment. We do have a couple clarifying questions about what was said at the last Planning Commission meeting. So these are the three amendments that we are proposing based on the conversation at the last Planning Commission meeting. I think number 2 and 3 are pretty self-explanatory, but we can go through all three of these however you want to do it. But the first one was the one that we wanted to clarify on the Planning Commission's intent for screening, and did that include RVs that are parked in the driveway, or was it just for ones that were in the back of the, behind the fence or behind the facade of the home? The second one was we've noticed going around town that sometimes RVs and boats and things are just on the lawn and not really in a formal spot. So we tried to encapsulate that with number 2, requiring some sort of improved surface, such as concrete, gravel, or pavers. And so that was kind of getting at that one. And then there's also a lot of them around town that are in really bad disrepair. And so number 3 was really to, it references our code section that's already existing that talks about the inoperable vehicles. So we thought that was the best way, just to, because there's already an existing code section, just to reiterate it here and give us a little more teeth in enforcing those ones that are inoperable and, parked on the lawn. So, I mean, we can go through these, but number 1 is the one we're really looking for a little clarification. We do have a resolution. If you're inclined to support the resolution, we would take that, then we'll take your suggested amendments to the city council, like you've done many times before. You're a recommending body to the council when we're amending the zoning ordinance. The council would be required to do 2 hearings if they wanted to do an amendment to the ordinance, and then it would take an effect 30 days after that. So it's a long process to amend the city code. But this is kind of, we're about halfway through it at this point if this proceeds the way we're going down the path here. So I'll just leave it there, and maybe we can talk about all 3 of these, or just number 1, or you can give us your input and let us know if we encapsulated what your direction was last time, and I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Are we going to public comment first, or? Okay, got it. I will now officially open the public hearing at 6:18. In-person commenters may fill out a speaker card before or after they have spoken. Please submit to the city clerk for the record. 3 minutes are allotted to each speaker. Please note, staff and the Planning Commission will address your comments and questions after the public hearing is closed and will not enter into dialogue with commenters. Mr. City Clerk, are there any members of the public wishing to make a comment at this time?
If you care about how I explain it.
Great. Hi there. Suzanne Black. Not Susan, Suzanne. Thanks. After the last meeting, I came away feeling like I just hope that whatever you come up with is something you're going to enforce. As someone who spent 30 years working in county government and law enforcement, I don't see the point in having any ordinances unless they're going to be enforced, whether they're complaint-driven or otherwise. So I don't have an enormous dog in this fight other than just general quality of life and my concern that I said last time about kids and the danger when streets are too compacted. But, you moved that. I have questions on the 1, 2, 3. One is, I think it's important that front yard be defined, because I don't know that I know the answer to that. 3, I think it's important that good condition be defined. Because if you come up with amendments that are as vague as the existing one, again, I don't see the point. And my other question would be, is it going to be delineated how much, if this passes, particularly where people might have to add gravel or concrete, what's the time frame that they have to comply? What, are people going to, how are people with any recreational vehicles going to receive this information, and what's the time to comply? Those are the questions that I came up with just for now. So I think that's it. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Mr. City Clerk, are there any other members of the public wishing to make comment at this time? Okay. Seeing no hands raised, I'd like to close public hearing at 6:21 and bring it back to the Planning Commission for their comments and questions.
Can you roll the screen to the upper part where there's the, I can't remember, the declarations or whatever you call that, where it says the reason for this, it's the justification.
This,
Oh,
this slide, that's in your packet. Are you talking about, oh, the?
I think one of them had to do with property value, preserving property value, and I wonder.
It's in the ordinance recitals, Mike. It should be page 1 of attachment, the ordinance, draft ordinance attachment. Yeah.
Well, the point has to
Go
do
down.
with, yeah, reduce adjacent property values and prevent neighbors from having full enjoyment of their property. I kind of question if we have ordinance of that sort. There's a whole lot of other things that we could have ordinances on, like people that rent a house and don't maintain the yards, it's full of weeds, they might cut them once a year when they get 4 feet high, that park, just litter the front of their homes and things like that. I think those also have a bad effect on property value for adjacent property owners. So that was just a comment. The other one had to do with if these little walls, these 3 to 5 foot high walls, are supposed to be erected on a driveway. Most driveways have a bit of a slope to them, and they're paved. Attaching, physically how to build those things and have them stand up presents a question in my mind, because you can't sink posts in the ground to build, to connect fences to. So the other, one other thing that I thought of was, well, perhaps people will buy these PVC pole tents and they'll sprout up all over town and they'll completely cover the vehicle, which I think are about as unsightly as one of these fences. So I just think aesthetically, a lot of this has to do with, people's various judgments regarding the aesthetics of an RV. I don't know, I just have a lot of problems with this thing.
Commissioner Cadle, do you have any input on reduced adjacent property values or property values of neighboring properties that have trailers and stuff parked on them?
Yeah, so I think, from being a realtor for almost a decade now, home values that have recreational parking actually can increase the property values quite a bit. And if your home sells for more because you have RV parking, then the adjacent properties are usually going to sell for more as well, because they become comps for them. So I think Bill brings up a very good point, that it is a matter of how you look at that aesthetically. Is it a pleasant sight or is it an unpleasant sight? Versus, trying to say that it's going to affect the property value of the neighbor's property just by it being there.
Have you ever had anybody haggle price because a neighbor has a RV parked when they go to see the property or anything?
I've have comments on it by, how it's parked. If it's stored properly, obviously it's not usually an issue brought up, but if it's parked on the street and it feels like it's blocking their driveway or part of the curb appeal of their home, then absolutely it can be brought up as, used as a negative, Yeah.
Okay. Other comments?
Yeah, actually, I have a couple. Building a 3-foot fence, building a 3-foot fence in front of a 7 or 8 foot or taller trailer, just, to me, it just doesn't make any sense. I just can't see the benefit. It's like, oh yeah, there's a RV with a tiny little fence in front of it. It's easy enough to put up something that's maybe less desirable, who knows? And then further, again, like was just mentioned, the term shall appear in good condition is rather subjective, and I don't think that's enforceable at all. I mean, it's good condition to who, right? I mean,
Right, yeah.
and those are the main hesitations I have with the way this is written. I mean, I could just see striking a good condition portion and then leave the rest, because having a registered vehicle that's operable, that's one thing, and the condition is up to the owner, I guess, right?
I agree with a lot of those points. I think that having the screen in between the neighboring properties is more important than the screen in front of it, because you're really not doing much good with a 3 to 5 foot fence in front of it, which I thought that we had kind of delved into that in the last meeting, that street facing wasn't quite as critical as neighboring properties.
I think the street facing is all we can do, because the neighboring properties, the neighbor can put the fence up, right? Neighbor can screen, put trees up on their yard to block the other neighbor who has the RV parking there. So the side is not the problem, it's the front of the house that's the problem, really. Unless there's a backyard that's backed up to another backyard. But again, they can put, the neighbor can put the fence up. So they
Wouldn't
can
it-
screen themselves away from whatever their other neighbor has on their yard unsightly on the side or behind, but it's in the front of the yard that we don't have anything to say. And my question for you, Rafa, I know you gave away your mic, but where is it written about that we have to have a 3-foot tall fence and no taller in the front yard? Is that it's in the zoning ordinance, yeah?
Yeah, that's in the zoning ordinance under the fence section. But it doesn't say you have to have, nobody has to have a fence. You don't.
Yeah, I'm
But
just
if you
saying,
build
you can't go
one,
higher than 3 feet in the front yard.
yeah.
So my
You can-
concerns
you-
are with one, what is the front yard? Where does that yard, the limitations of that yard, does it go into the driveway? So we need to define what is the yard versus the driveway, because I don't believe we want to screen off a driveway, or we're going to have a gated community. But the other is, we can't go higher than 3 feet in the front yard. So then to further define that 5-foot fence or taller barrier is actually to the edge of the home back, correct?
No,
Or
so.
how's that written in the ordinance?
So first of all, the front yard is defined, actually, like the zoning ordinance has, definition sections, and the front yard, backyard and side yard is defined in there, and it depends on the zoning district, and for the most part, most zoning districts, the front yard is the first 20 feet of the property.
Yep.
So that's essentially the front yard. But once you get 20 feet back, then the side and rear yard fence heights kick in. So and there it's 7 feet nowadays without a building permit. In the front yard, so it says 3 to 5 because like we talked about last time, you can increase the fence height with a minor exception by 2 feet. So in the front yard, you could increase it from 3 to 5. In the back, you could increase it from 7 to 9 if you like. But anything over 7 does require a building permit. So in addition, if you wanted to do a rear yard fence that's over 7, you'd have to get a building permit and a minor exception. But in the front yard, it'd just be the minor exception to increase it from 3 to 4 or 5. But without a minor exception, they could do 3 in the front yard, which is, again, is just the first 20 feet of the property. Meaning like from the back of sidewalk to into their property, like, towards the house. So that's the front yard.
So is that 20 feet the entire street distance?
Yeah, the width, yeah.
Okay.
And the front of the house is considered the side that the postal mark, I mean, how do you determine what is the front of the house? I know that there's some houses, like on corners, where you're like, which is the front? Like right across from Dahlia and Sage is a house where the guy built a fence that's probably 6 feet tall, which I would consider is the front of his house.
Well, the zoning code doesn't really get into definitions of the front of the house. It's more the front of the property, and,
Yeah, I'm just saying, if your street address is this, then that front would be on the street that your street address is on.
Typically,
right?
yeah.
That's typically the front
Yeah.
of the house,
yeah.
correct?
Yeah, and it get like a corner lot, it'll define it as, I think it says something like to the effect that whatever is the narrower frontage would be the front. And the wider would be like their street side yard. That's on a corner lot.
So just to make it easier, and I'm just jumping ahead to recommendations, but immediately I can see that if we say in the front yard, and I would reference our ordinance of what the front yard believes to be, so that they have to follow that, and then I would stick to the 3 feet only to match to that code. And then with the 5 feet, you can kind of talk about further how that can be applied as not part of the front of the yard, but towards the side yard or the backyard, to screen away the RV that they're storing.
Driveway, is the driveway in the front yard?
And that's where I would define as well, like.
Typically, yeah.
So do you have to screen off the entire front yard if someone's
That's
putting an RV?
that's what that's what our question is to you guys, essentially.
There'd be a challenge, you have to open a gate every time going out of your driveway.
Yeah, and we remembered, we tried to listen to it, we just couldn't catch the part of the meeting. I know safety concerns was brought up a lot last time, and the commission was concerned about safety, rightfully. And yeah, like an emergency getting out of the driveway, and I remember that coming up, so. But also, we did talk about screening too, so yeah, we didn't know whether, put an extra sentence in there saying something like, RVs in the driveway, this screening isn't required, or I don't know how do you guys want to deal with that part.
Yeah, would the fence for screening be exclusively around the RV versus the entirety of the front lot, which I thought the intent was more around the RV, which, it's pretty low.
It's really challenging,
So
though,
it's-
yeah. Are we,
We could amend, as Commissioner Acey said, in the front yard as defined by section, and then reference that. I think that is a good idea, just so it's clear.
And I would say not to include the driveway. Or how is the driveway defined in that ordinance as well? Because it would be nice to use that same kind of reference in the fact that it's the front yard minus the driveway, because I don't think we should approve something that is blocking off entrance to and from the home. Now, I get that they want to screen the RV on the driveway, but what are you going to do, put up fake trees around it or something?
Yeah, I know. It's tough.
I think if it's on your driveway, it's on their property, and it's in a way that they can store and get away from it. It's my personal belief.
Well, I
of
mean,
it, but I agree that they put it behind that, on the side yard and the backyard, screen it behind a fence. Then it should be stored behind a fence, similar to HOAs.
so should that then be reworded to say, instead of, where'd it go? I've got it here. Should it say side yard, front yard, side yard,
It could
and somehow omit the driveway from it?
I guess, is the commission, it sounds like you're not in support of trying to put a small fence in the driveway around the RV.
Oh, no.
I'm not.
Okay, so we could say,
You're not even screening anything.
No.
It's a 3-foot tall fence. You're not going to screen an RV. It's going to
Yeah.
look really pathetic.
It's gonna
You have
look
this
worse,
little
yeah.
weird gate that you have to move around an RV.
I'd feel comfortable just striking number 1.
say RVs parked not in the front.
But then you're saying, then
Or-
why wouldn't they just pull it up and put it in the front,
I'm just brainstorming here.
Yeah.
Just trying to get at
I get it.
if they can get it on the side of the house, not within the front yard, would you want to have a screening at that point? I don't know,
I agree. I don't know what one is doing for us, because there's really not much we can enforce. And you're asking about enforcement, and you're talking about only a 3-foot tall fence. If you're going to start requiring people to block driveways as part of that, then you're going to talk about a liability that the city puts on people for emergency or whatever. I mean, it'll make the news. It will make the news. We have to block off driveways. Because I think we'd be the only town in America that does that.
I agree, though, that like, if somebody's putting it right there on their side yard, so how do we
The
like
neighbor can put,
manage?
if it's the neighbor that has the problem, the neighbor can put up a fence.
No, I mean, like, if you have, say you have a really long side yard and they're parking it, basically on, like, up against your sidewalk on your side yard, would that be an area then that you would want to have a fence? I'm not saying in the driveway.
I just don't know how you can enforce it.
so if they pull it into the side, and they're not in the front yard anymore, and then have a fence to, like a gate, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that was kind of where my head was at, because I totally agree. We can't block driveways, and I think as an extension of the driveways, most people park them alongside the driveways on, a gravel pad or something on the side of the house, on the side of the driveway. And I'm not a fan of blocking that, because then you're really getting into your parking area, and a lot of these streets are already congested enough that we're now, going to be diminishing people's parking area because we're putting fencing and stuff in there that's limiting how tight they can park their cars and causing more congestion on the streets. Yeah, my mindset is more the screening between neighbors, because to me, in my mind, that's probably what would irritate me more is looking out my window and that's what I see, where a 7-foot fence in between neighbors, that will, for the most part, make a larger difference. Because where is a person living? They're living in their home, and they're looking out of their windows of their home. They're, sure, you have to walk by a neighbor's yard from time to time or drive past it, but more than likely, you're going to be in your yard looking at it. So to me, the adjoining neighbors' properties and the screening of that is more important. And it sounded like from public comment last meeting that was more so the sentiment of the public commenters, that, when they're looking down and they're seeing them all lined up, or looking out of their house and they're seeing them right there, that was more the concern, not so much as when you're walking past their house or driving past their house, what you're seeing from that facade. But I feel like, obviously a shared fence should be a shared responsibility.
Yeah.
But the fence, I mean, if it does require that there's a new fence to be built, does that burden fall on the owner of the RV, because they're the ones that want to store the RV on the property, and the other neighbor might be like, well, I don't want to look at it, but I also don't want to, pay for you to have a new fence to comply with the law. So it's
And
another.
I'll ask another commission question to you. If the two parties sold their homes, who then owns that fence? Who has the responsibility, the ownership of that fence? So there's property value to that fence, correct?
Yeah.
And it's a shared
It's a
between
shared
both those
fence,
people.
so both owners have
technically, the
responsibility and
cost of
ownership.
operational of keeping that fence up and everything is a shared cost. So whether or not the neighbor who's not liking the RV wants to pay for that fence entirely, or you're saying the city should force the person with the RV to pay for the fence entirely, but yet this increased their property value. I don't know. I think it has to be a shared cost or shared.
Yeah.
And I think that's, this one person's asking for screening. This person has to do the screening. It's a shared cost.
Make it work. Yep.
It could be
It's just being good neighbor.
RVs parked in the rear or side yard must be screened by a 7-foot fence.
At shared yards.
Be tough for us
Shared
to get
fence.
into the cost of the fence and trying to, do all that. But, I mean, if you are in favor of some kind of screening and you want to see the ones that are on the side and the rear screened, it could be as simple as RVs in the side or rear must be screened by a 7-foot fence. Is that what you were thinking, Rob? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. That sounds good. But if we do that, I think we still, if we're silent, then we're kind of being silent on the front. And it sounds like the commission is in favor of still allowing people to park their RVs in the driveway. If we just change number 1 to address the side and rear, and we're silent on the front, then people, I'm just worried, again, about enforcement. It doesn't say you can park in the front, then people are going to say, well, then you can't. So I think we still need to address the front somehow. Just say that if you wanted to allow it, then say that, or somehow the front needs to be addressed.
Yeah. Well, I think if it's parked on the side or the back, it should be changed from this to the point of the fact that if it's parked on the side or the back, if someone parks their RV there, then it triggers the complaint to the city should force both parties to have to put up screening together. That's what it should be, so that if you park your RV in the side or the back of the house and your neighbor complains about it, then both of you might have to be forced to put up a fence or you have to remove your RV. How can we write that in there? I think that's your choice. I think the front yard, the same thing can happen about asking them to screen their yard, but I can't screen up the driveway. You'd have to determine
When it comes to fences, people just like trees, it's essentially, that's a civil matter about cost and who's, but the code does address, say you can't have a 7-foot fence, but that's all we get into. We just say you can do it and it has to be this tall, but who pays for it, who builds it? I think the code is written to be silent on that for a reason. The city doesn't want to get into people's personal finances and who's responsible for, paying for the fence. It's just, if you do want a fence, this is how tall it is, and then the city's silent on what they do after that,
I feel like I have seen something in the IBC about the fences being shared property, and maybe like we reference that, and that this is what can be done, the 7-foot fence, and then with a little asterisk, IBC code, whatever, and then points out that that's shared property. So if people want to go down that path, it's not no, you have to do it, no, you have to do it, and ending up in like small claims or something. I'm pretty sure I've read that. When I was looking up replacing our own fence, I looked into the IBC on it.
I think it may be a fair argument to say if you're parking your RV in your side or rear, part of that obligation is that you screen it because you are, if we're talking about money, you are saving money not having to park it in a storage. But, we'll look into the building code, what you just referenced, and see if there's anything there that makes sense to reference here. The other option is we could be silent on the screening inside and rear. I think the biggest impact, if we said in the side and rear, would be that front fence that faces the street. Because most houses typically would have a fence, between the side, but I think that where we come into play the most is that between the fence and the edge of the house and the RV, what you can see from the street, if that makes sense. I think that's probably where this thing would be most.
just the citywide HOA. It just seems pretty interesting.
I think that a lot of homes that are kind of having this conflict of parking it there and what is defining screening. I think that there are a lot of homes that don't have the dividing fence in that front area along the two, and I think that may be, and I could be wrong, but I believe the homes that have, kind of where this is originated from, that is the case, that the RV is parked there and it may be stored nicely, but they don't, the fence is 20-foot setback, the RV's in front of that, and there's nothing in between the two. And I think that's where we need some more clear definition, is that area, that separation, and the definition of the screening as well. In some of the examples we were given, in some of those cases, there was like non-deciduous trees and items other than just a fence, right? So I think we need to give better definition of that, and better definition of the screening between yards, particularly if we're going to say that street facing isn't important, then we really haven't defined screening at all if we remove that item from it, because we don't have anything else in there that's defining the screening.
Well, as we suggested here, solid board, fence, or wall. I mean, you're right, vegetation works too. It probably takes longer to grow. But you're right, there are places where it could be on the side and there's no fence there. Up in Jefferson Springs. And so, I mean, I would suggest if the commission wants to require fencing or screening for ones in the side and the rear, we start with, a 7-foot solid wood fence, or we can say, or I mean, it's going to be tough. It's tough to, we don't want to bring people back to planning commission to determine if the vegetation, so it would be someone like one of us making that call that meets the intent of the ordinance. But we could put something in there, it's a little ambiguous though, or other screening methods to the satisfaction of the planning director, or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay, I mean, there's some nice fences that have, like, I've seen a lot of nice ones now that are like corrugated and, so like corrugating roofing being used as fencing. So I don't know about limiting like verbally to wood. There's some other items that can make nice.
So
fences.
what if somebody has a 22-foot side yard and they just bought a 26-foot RV, and now we're asking them, they have to put a fence that goes out past the end of their house, their garage? It's gonna look awkward when you have weird shaped fences coming out of houses just to enclose a RV 3 to 5 feet.
Put your
No, no,
permanent
no.
structures, and then you move, and you have this weird awkward fence there.
Yeah.
Drilling holes in concrete, trying to get fence posts in there.
No, I'm not saying front facing. I'm saying strictly between the two properties. Front facing would still be open. So it'd be probably most likely an extension of the backyard fence all the way through between the two properties, because that's where most of the RVs are parked. They're parked on the front side yard, alongside the driveway, in between the two neighboring properties. And so that's where I'm referring to, is basically that extension of that fence.
I still think there's going to be a slippery slope there where some people are going to say, oh, well, look at my home, it was built in the 50s. This isn't the front of my home, this is the side of my home. So they're going to have to be explained to that either the street defines the front of their home, because you see homes all the time that have side driveways, not driveways on the front. So
Yeah.
those people are going to have issues with that type of enforcement.
That was why I was thinking it should define with adjoining or neighboring properties. It should be defined as screening between neighboring properties, was my,
And as you brought up earlier, though, I still have a problem with trying to require screening. I mean, if somebody takes a fence to the RV next door, they have the ability to put their own fence up, right? I mean,
Paid it
Yeah.
out at your own cost, and you're,
right.
whatever. I mean, I did that at my house. I put up my own fence and paid for it.
same thing, right? I mean, I took issue
I
with.
I think number 2 probably solves the majority of the problem, and that's by eliminating people from parking them on
Lawns.
the lawn. That's really the eyesore, is usually when people just back their boat up or their RV right on the lawn in front of the house, and you can't even see the front of the house anymore.
shall be maintained.
Yeah.
Deteriorates the lawn, you end up with a little mud pit in the winter.
I would ask that we clarify what improved surface is, as more, maybe redefine it as improved hardscaped surface, because hardscape is technically the industry term for concrete, and a driveway surface, so.
Yeah, we wanted to keep it flexible. That's
Rocks are
what we
still
talked
considered
about,
hard surfaces.
using hardscape, the term hardscape, but we kind of came back to improved surface just to allow for more flexibility, because concrete can be expensive, and I don't know, but we can, we're here to talk about it, so if you want to say hardscape, we can amend that.
I think rock can count as hardscape.
An improved hardscape surface such as concrete, gravel, pavers.
So okay.
And on number 3, I would add registered and operable.
We can say as Commissioner Carney said, recreational vehicles shall be maintained in an operable in accordance with the code section, and get rid of the appear in good condition. Because that's the subjective part to it.
Yeah, and you don't know what that is. That's what, but I do think registered would be,
My only thing to that is that there's a lot of people who will non-op, like the driving motorhomes in the off-season to save on insurance and registration. They'll non-op them and then
that's up to the
re-register.
police to enforce this.
No, I'm just saying, we're saying registered in the drive.
They're just storing it on their
the
property.
driveway.
If it's on
for it to be
private property,
registered.
chief?
But if it becomes unmovable, stored on a private property, does that now become a structure?
Dirt, yeah.
'Cause then I would just say you go into the whole easement things of a structure or setbacks.
We did talk about the operable and non-operable, and based on kind of the input from the police department, we felt like it could be not registered and be on private property and be okay as long as it met the other criteria of parked correctly and in decent, condition. So, I mean, we could add that it has to be registered, or, I don't know what that gets us.
Yeah. No, it's kind of a contradiction, though, because we're saying it must be operable, and here we're like having it registered specifically to say not operable. So, yeah, but it is registered, but it's
The
also,
form
but
of
it's contradictory to if we're putting both operable and registered in there and somebody's non-opping it, we're like, oh, we're going to exclude that, and you're
Hey,
like,
it
but
could be
that's.
an alert that someone is putting an inoperable vehicle
Yeah.
there.
One thing that I think that we could include in this somehow, like when we're talking about in good condition, I know we're going to remove that, but tarping them, when people are tarping these things, it's bad, and the tarps are getting all torn up, and they're not, legitimate covers. I would like to see something in there that, like, covers have to be, but again, it's subjective to be in
Yeah,
good condition, but can,
How are you going to police that?
yeah, you
That's,
can't tarp
I think
them.
we were going for the tarp when we
It
said
was-
in good
there's
condition.
like one, there's one over on Third Street that I was driving by today, and I was just like, they're like, there's just tarps all over it, and they're all torn up and ratty, and it's like almost worse than looking at the vehicle itself.
I know it's subjective, and
It
that's
totally
why
is. Yeah,
the current ordinance, I think, really didn't define screening, because my guess is 12 years ago, a planning commission was having the same conversation, and it was very difficult and so they left it vague, and so now we're taking another crack at it, but that's where I think we were trying to get to, was the blue tarp in the appear in good condition. Is there anything in that section 8 that talks about that, Ralph, do you know? Or does it further define in that section 8.02? Let's look. No, okay, no, it's pretty silent.
Can we add
Rightfully.
something that's not one of these three things, and maybe add a little definition to how far you have to move your vehicle if it is parked on the road? I mean, we do know we have a problem where we can just,
Yeah, that's,
That's a different code.
that's a different code, yeah.
yeah,
right.
we're in zoning now, that's vehicle code, so, I mean, I can suggest that for one of the subcommittees to start that conversation, and I know that we did with the previous chief, kind of start talking about that, but it
I just
didn't-
think that's going to make more movement in the city than anything
Yeah.
we're talking about
Yeah.
right now.
It is the bigger problem, for sure.
Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
kind of like this mile idea.
I do, I think it's great,
Come back later.
Yeah. I think it's perfectly reasonable.
Well,
Okay.
So let's just go with the ones we kind of have a little consensus on here. Number 2, we're going to add developed with hardscape, we're going to add hardscape in there somewhere where it makes sense. Is that
Just improved hardscape surface.
improved hardscape? Okay, so that one. And then for number 3, we're going to say recreational vehicles maintained and inoperable with accordance to section 8.02, which that 8.02 does not give a lot of specificity, but it does refer to inoperable vehicles on lawns.
Oh, there was another question that was asked, which is time to comply. So
Yeah.
would that, would we want, are we talking about time to comply once we approve something, or time to comply after, say, it's been cited? What is that duration once they've been cited to comply before being cited again?
We've talked, our code enforcement is complaint-based, and I know there's a lot of criticism, about a lot of rules not being enforced. I mean, we don't have the capacity to enforce every rule on the book. We rely when folks it's complaint-driven. So to answer your question.
Prioritize things, I get it.
To answer your question, the timeline would, once they get that first letter, it's a process that we go through. It's not super quick. They get letters, and then we elevate it to the city attorney, and there's a hearing, and so I think the time frame would be, it's hard to define because each one's a little different, but it is a process with a couple of letters, then to the attorney, then it gets elevated, then it goes to a hearing, unless they comply somewhere along the way. So I don't have a great answer for the time, and I wouldn't anticipate that. I mean, maybe we can do some outreach once this is done to the community to try to gain some compliance or just make the community aware of the changes. Maybe that's something we could do after whatever the council does with this, that we can just kind of do an outreach through our normal channels to say, hey, in case you have an RV, these are the new rules, just maybe gain some compliance that way.
Yeah, to me, it's more like, hey, be a good neighbor, because what are we going to do at the end of the day after we've gone through all of these steps and tried to resolve these things, and somebody doesn't remove their property from their property? We're going to forcefully go in and take their stuff from them and off of their property, take their own property off of their property and take it somewhere else. That to me feels like a lot of overreach. I feel like being neighborly and getting people to do the right thing is the way to go. But at the end of the day, we can only take it so far, and we can ask nicely, but what do we do? Once we've gone through all those steps, is that the resolution? We're going in?
Well, I mean, if at the end of the day, if they're found not in compliance and we take them to a hearing officer, then we start levying fines.
Yeah.
And
I
they
feel like
get
it has
hit.
to be something super egregious, though. Like, it can't just be like you have an okay, trailer parked there on your property and your neighbor just doesn't like it. And
The ones that get to that point are egregious. The
Yeah.
minor ones, either we gain compliance or it never really gets to the point of the hearing officer, and levying fines and liens on properties and stuff. We have done that on the real egregious ones. It's just.
I guess what I'm saying is, like, it's got to be like rat infested, oil leaking,
And
just
they have, and
a
they
public
have- they show
safety, health and
no-
safety hazard.
Yeah, and they show no effort to comply. That's one of the things they do,
Okay.
nothing, or they don't. We will work with anyone. We just want to get compliance. We don't want to give people fines. We just want to get these, off the books and get it into compliance. But that's kind of our code enforcement. It's another tough thing. So in terms of the first one, what do you guys think? Number one.
I recommend we remove it. I don't think there's much we can do about it. I think if you tried to force something through the backyard and fence, you're dealing with property share and issues, and I don't think we can really do much about it. I think we come out of this with at least 2 and 3, which kind of makes them put it into a better situation. Number 2 feeds to even that about oil leaking. When you have a hardscape surface, you can see if there's oil leaking, which is better for the environment than just parking on the grass, which could leak oil into the ground, which leaks oil into our waters.
So could, instead of appear in good condition, could it be changed to somehow say, health and safety in there, and, I feel like that becomes more enforceable when we're getting into something that's becoming physically detrimental to the neighbors, not just visually, right? You're getting into pollutants and
Wasn't maintained.
isn't, yeah,
Perfect, well, then we gotta
you know,
check.
that is deemed a health or safety hazard, maybe? That,
Can we define health and safety hazard?
I think there's probably plenty of code that could classify that, probably in the vehicle code. I bet there's probably something in there.
It might be in the,
Chief Parker would know more.
I think that's where you have to, in a different meeting, redefine what section 8.2.30 is. Because I think your maintenance of your property is also an issue that could be better addressed. And that's where you deal with your
Leaking
tarp
fluid
stuff.
and-
That's where you deal with all that, is in what the code is of how you're maintaining your property. And again, I'd go into the whole abandonment thing again, talking about commercial properties. Yeah, safety and unsafe circumstance, how it's stored could be unsafe. Yeah, there's could be many things. If it's posing a fire risk, it could be unsafe. I mean,
And I think that's
how do you define what
reasonable.
is unsafe?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there are a lot of different ways that we could, that could be defined, whether it's, you know,
You can also come before us like that. Can't you have stuff like if it's egregious enough that it's brought before the planning department or something to review it and go, okay, that is unsafe?
In terms of,
talking like, you know, if there's leaking fluids or the manner in which it's stored could be a fire hazard.
Yeah.
No, if-
Propane
if-
tanks everywhere outside.
Yeah.
right, it's code enforcement.
What?
It's code enforcement. So there's a code enforcement officer at the end of that road that makes a decision when the evidence is presented to them, and they determine if it's not in compliance and how to move forward. We had in some cases where we go in and clean it ourselves, and then we assess the property.
So can you put an added definition to that saying unsafe? Is that definable, or
In number 3.
at number 3?
Instead of saying appear in good condition, because again, that's so
Just
subjective.
be unsafe.
Yeah.
Be in good condition, just.
Be in safe condition.
I think so. I mean, Chief, I don't know if you had any thoughts on that, but can you come up so people can hear it who are listening?
I'm sorry, I was answering his question while you guys were talking, but I think your question is if vehicles is leaking fluid on private property? Is
Or
that what the
rat
question?
infested, you know, or
Unsafe. How can we
unsafe.
Safe.
define
Yeah.
what is
Yeah.
safe or unsafe?
Yeah, that would be like, it's a code enforcement issue because it's on private property. And we have gone on into residences and things and have initiated code enforcement violations for the egregious acts. You know, some cases will be like they'll build a toilet in the backyard, literally, and like an outhouse kind of thing. So we have initiated code enforcement. We've red tagged homes that way, and so it would be the RV parked in the front, leaking fluids would be the kind of the same thing.
So there
so it
there
would
is a
be-
code we could refer to if we said vehicles must appear to be in a safe condition, and tie that to a code for enforcement.
I believe there is a code for parking in front of your home, a vehicle, and you can't park it across the lawn area. It has to be in the driveway, and I couldn't recite that section to you, but I believe there is already a code violation for that. If you park a vehicle in front of your home, it has to be parked in the driveway. It can't be parked across your lawn. And I've had those complaints as well, but Raphael could probably cite the section for you, but
I think we
or
want
maybe not.
I'm not trying to put you in a spot, but
It's good.
I think the question is under number 3 that, well, it's not up there now, but
Yeah.
recreational vehicles shall appear in a good condition, so we're going to remove that shall appear in a good condition, but I think the question is, can we put unsafe in there as a,
Yeah, but, again, so if we get called there, an officer is going to look at, okay, what's unsafe about it? At what point we'd send an email to Raphael saying it's unsafe? Leaky fluids and stuff would probably classify that as being unsafe. But again, the officer would have to witness that standing on the roadway or on the curb. We couldn't enter someone's property just to look at the complaint of a parked RV. We'd have to view it from the roadway or contact the homeowner. Hey, we got this complaint, and let's take a look at your RV, and then allow us to do that. But yeah, and then I was just commenting to him about trailers. If a fifth wheel RV, it's not operable unless you attach it to something. How does that? There's so many different things you guys have to think about.
I don't think it would be, I mean, we could put unsafe in here, but it is subjective in the same way that the appearance shall be good. So maybe a
I
little
just
less.
feel like that, I feel like,
At least there's
As
a
gov-
better
yeah.
professional definition of what
Yeah.
is safe.
Yeah.
And there's maybe not a ton of things they can do about it, but if it's stored on 5 cinder blocks and about to fall over on the next kid that walks by, I would
Yeah.
say it's unsafe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
If it's stored next to a way that it's going to cause a fire, I would think that it's unsafe. So I think I would leave that up to the professionals to determine what is safe and unsafe, but just swap good condition to safe condition.
Yeah, no, I think that's reasonable.
yeah, I feel like that's more within our purview, because now it's impacting others, right? Like, you're minding your own, okay, I don't really like the look of what you have there, but once it's affecting the health and safety of the people next to you or the pedestrians, whatever it may be, then I feel like that's more in our purview to be able to go in and to say, hey, you can't do this on your property.
And the potential for fire, and
Yeah.
especially this time of year, is also a concern. So.
Chief Parker made a point about not being able to store vehicles on lawns, and it would be good, I think, if everybody's in agreement, to add that code to number 2, where we're talking about hardscape surfaces, cannot be parked on grass, in compliance with vehicle code, so that is also reinforcing, so that way they're not
It also
like,
helps
oh.
take care of the number 1.
Well, it's in there. It cannot be
If it's in
parked
there,
on
then you already
grass or
have
dirt.
what's addressing the front yard, so you kind of take care of the number 1 by putting that code into number 2.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, it's in there. One of the things I want to point out, it's not shown here, but it's in your the attachment, that's the ordinance, is preceding these new, oh, there we go. Might go up a little bit. So B1 is what started all of this. So what we did. Okay. So B1, the screening shall be required, and that's what started this conversation. That's why we added number 2. So if we're going to eliminate number 2, our suggestion would be to strike through number 1, screening for recreational vehicles stored and parked in open, and then just from they may be parked completely in a garage, keep that section. Because if we strike 2, then 1 doesn't make sense. So does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, because my thought was the screening between neighbors. That was my biggest thing, is that I felt needed definition was the screening between neighbors. And if nobody's in agreement with that, then yeah, then it would make sense that we would strike those.
Because number 1 is original, that's what was there, and number 2 was trying to address number 1's lack of any direction. So I can see, again, why people struggled with this in the past.
Any other comments? Let's go.
Except for the,
I do love screening, by the way. I just think you have more chance of mandatorily making screening happen when you get a developer involved. When they're newly building a
Right.
space, you can force the screening and they have to pay for it. The neighbor doesn't have to pay part of it. But this problem is that you have a share responsibility between the two neighbors to have to pay for half that screening caused by one person's complaint. So it's kind of like you're forcing your neighbor to pay half up of this if they can or cannot afford it.
Right. I feel like, just being a good neighbor, you would do something to contribute to fix the problem so that you have, good neighbors to live next to on both sides.
Yeah.
And, and just be reasonable. But obviously, not everybody's in a position to do that, so I get it. So we do not have a motion then, right? Okay.
so we're going to remove the references to screening and number 2 entirely, and then in number 3, we're going to add all weather surface. And then, I guess number 3 will appear. Number 4, we're going to remove shall appear in good condition and replace that with safe. And then maintain and operable in accordance with that and cite that code section. And I think by citing that code section in number 4, which is on the screen here, gets to the commission's, because that's the section that talks about inoperable vehicles and trash in yards and things like that. So I think it gets to it by having it in that one.
Question, just, I think we talked about it last time, but just to make sure, we're defining recreational vehicles as RVs, fifth wheels,
There's a definition in the
Boats.
zoning. Yeah.
are ski-doos involved? Those wave runner things?
I would think they would fall under that
Under boat.
category.
There is a definition of RV that's pretty.
Probably under watercraft.
In zoning, section 18, definitions. Boats, boat means vessel for water travel, camper trailer, motorized home, boats, off-road vehicle, race cars, travel trailers, truck camper. And then all of those have more definition. I'm just citing there's 7.
Okay.
We can remove race cars.
Because Eric retired.
No, I don't think we should have a requirement for those to be screened at all.
So I'll make a motion. I move to approve this with these adjustments, that you remove numbers 1 and 2. That on number 3, you put in hardscaped surface, and that you refer to wherever the area of the same code for that number, about the front yard parking. If there's a way to make reference to that, or are you saying that that's already in the, currently in this ordinance, or is there a separate ordinance we can refer to on that number 2? And then on number, which is number 4 on this one, I would say that we need to add that safety and then refer to that code as well.
Yeah, I think in terms of the off-street parking, are you saying you'd like that's for the front yard and you want to reference to the front yard definition?
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, no problem.
Yep. That was my motion.
All right, for the record, I don't want to have you read that, but it's a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Cloverdale recommending the City Council of the City of Cloverdale approve zoning code text amendments to section 18.11.060, recreation vehicle parking on the Cloverdale Municipal Code as amended, as you just stated. Is that
Yes.
correct?
That you
Is there a
remove number
second?
1 and 2. Number 3, you add hardscape surface and refer to the code of what is the front yard. And then on number 4, you add you change a good condition to safe condition, and you refer to that code about what is safety, or what is a safe vehicle.
Do I have a second? All right. So Commissioner
AC made the motion.
made the motion, and Commissioner Carney seconded it. Can I get a roll call?
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Acey?
Aye.
Commissioner Cadle?
Aye.
Commissioner Carney?
Aye.
Commissioner Wiggy?
Aye.
Vice Chair Spengler?
Aye.
Commissioner Williams as an alternate tonight will not be voting. Motion passes.
So this will go to the council, and there'll be another debate there.
Yep.
So there'll be another opportunity for audience members to participate at the council level. This is a recommendation to the council.
Okay, moving on to department reports.
Okay, so our next meeting is scheduled for July 2nd, but it's going to be canceled because it's the holiday week. We do have a couple of applications working their way through, so we may ask and poll you guys on what would be a good date for a special meeting in July. There's a couple use permits, one for live music and one for vacation rental. Those are use permits, so those will be looking at is that use appropriate in that location and what kind of parameters we want to put on that use. So depending on how far they get, they're probably going to be anxious to get that done. So we may ask for a special meeting later in July. But
What's the live music? Is that the 101 North or?
no, it's Volpe, the sawmill.
Yeah, something else.
I want to let you know that, remember the active transportation plan workshop that we had, where we went through the plan? Well, they're going to have a workshop here at the Cloverdale Performing Arts Center Thursday at 5. So if you can make it, you don't feel obligated. You've already done your part reviewing that, but it's going to be a public workshop where they're going to be soliciting public comments on some of the plans. I just want to, I know he's not here, but really thank Commissioner Sanders for his 4 years on the commission and all his hard work. I know I think he's getting a new job and is going to be really, really busy with that. So I appreciate him not trying to do both and just make the commitment. And I'll speak to the mayor about how we're going to open the recruitment to get a new planning commissioner, and let you guys know what we're going to do there. And unless, do you have anything else, Rob, or no? And thank you, Chief Parker. Appreciate you showing up. Very helpful.
Thank
You
you.
can come every time now. That's the end of my report.
Okay. Would any commissioners like to provide reports this evening? Written reports? There are none, right? Commission direction on future agenda items. Would any commissioners like to provide direction on any future planning commission or subcommittee agenda items?
Are we there yet to get a Alexander Valley report out, or is that still kind of on?
I think if we wait a little longer, we've been teased with some information that's not really like out there yet.
Okay,
So
I'll wait. I'm
Yeah.
patient. I'm going to keep asking every month.
Yeah,
just to see
no, I
what's
appreciate
happening.
it. It's exciting.
Would this be where we'd want to give direction on the code enforcement of on-street parking and reevaluating that and kicking that to one of the other committees, one of the other subcommittees to put that on their agenda to,
I think at least starting the wheel
I think so,
rolling. I don't know
too.
if it's going to lead to next month's agenda, but, at least getting it moving so they can come back to
Yeah.
us at whatever time frame that takes.
Chief,
than what they did to us.
I'm going to suggest the Police and Finance Committee, Subcommittee, to have a discussion about looking at the code section that only allows people to just move like 2 feet.
Yeah.
try to see if there's options for that.
At least set a definition of what is you need to move your vehicle after 72 hours.
Mike?
I was just mentioning to Mike that it would also be a good idea to put in there, if a trailer is parked on the street, it needs to be attached to something that can actually move it. Because sometimes they'll leave the trailer, and take off, and then they'll leave it there for 5
Same
days
for
or so.
a watercraft, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. If it's a trailer parked on the roadway, it has to be hooked up to something that can tow it. And I think Katati, it was like a few hours that they could leave it unattached to something, but they had to move it. So something to look at. I mean, there's so many different ordinances out there that can help us identify something more specific to get people to comply. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
I think that'll make more leverage than anything we did tonight.
I agree. Okay. So thank you all for coming. This meeting is adjourned at 7:21 PM to the next regularly scheduled meeting of the Planning Commission, currently set as August 6th, 2024.